have a special friend with us this afternoon. There is an old-fashioned word which is so appropriate in describing him, and that word is loyalty. He has always helped the city of Chicago, and on a personal note, he's always helped me. It is his hallmark. And that is not hyperbole, it is a fact. And to introduce the author, the historian, the foster parent par excellence, the outstanding real estate lawyer, the superb piano player, the dean of the city council, the chairman of the finance committee, I'm asking his co-author to introduce our special friend. His co-author is a Chicago writer and historian in residence of the Irish Fellowship of Chicago. He is a contributor to Town and Country magazine, a political speechwriter in Chicago City Hall, as well as a former managing editor of the World of Hibernia magazine. He's the author of Frank Lloyd Wright's Chicago. His latest books, Strange But True, Chicago Tales of the Windy City, and Chicago in Photography, were both released in December 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom O'Gorman. Thomas?
Thank you very much. Patrolman George R. Neal, star 5166, the 18th District, 38 years old, was in plain clothes when he became embroiled in a dispute in a back-of-the-yards diner located at 5435 South Halsted Street on Monday, May 19th, 1930. Neal was brutally attacked by four men thought to belong to an Irish club devoted to the violent hatred of African Americans. Neal saw the four men order a black customer off his seat and began to beat him. Believing that they were part of this Irish club, Neal announced he was a Chicago police officer. Neal then told the man he did not have to move for them. The four men then began to attack Neal with unvanquished fury. One man threw a stool at him while the others pummeled him. One of them suddenly grabbed Neal's revolver and fired twice, fatally wounding him in the stomach before fleeing the scene. On Thursday, May 22nd, 1930, Neal succumbed to his wounds at the German Deaconess Hospital at 54th and Morgan Streets. Later that day, John Kelly of 5630 South Morgan Street and Daniel Lynch of 5634 South Peoria were booked on the charge of murder. The coroner also ordered the arrest of two of their known associates, William O'Malley and William Cousins. Officer Neal, himself a resident of nearby Bridgeport, was buried at Mount Greenwood Cemetery at 2900 West 111th Street. His killers were never convicted of his death. It is fair to say that End of Watch was a long and exhaustive enterprise. I almost cannot remember a time over the past 8 years when we were not at work on it in one way or another. It was not a book easily dashed off. During the project, I began to think every single day, recalling the words of Plato, "To begin is to be half done." So, in my eyes, we were always half finished. The research for End of Watch came in many waves, and whenever we thought we were reaching the end, we'd find something still left to say. I am proud of the work that we did. We had a large team. There are tens of thousands of details and facts contained in End of Watch. It was necessary to keep a close eye peeled so nothing was lost. End of Watch, in the language of law enforcement, means a tour of duty ends. Like our cover photo of Mounted Chicago Police, circa 1907, the title just seemed to fit. In attempting to tell the story of 534 men and women, I believe a unique urban history has emerged. I think Chicago is a stronger place for having its story told through the lives and deaths of these remarkable human beings. Whether a death took place in the era of gas lamps and horse-drawn carriages, or the shrill, piercing sound of a siren and flashing Chicago blue Mars light of a modern squad car, the sacrifice of these remarkable police officers tells a piece of the truth about Chicago and the people who live here. I would just like to share a few tidbits of facts that we found as we swam through the waters between 1853 and 2006. There are 534 Chicago police narratives contained in End of Watch. 442 of them are contained in the Honored Star case at Chicago Police Headquarters on Michigan Avenue. Last May the 15th, 78 additional individuals were added for the police memorial wall in Grant Park. One officer was found on the Officer Down Memorial page on the web, and we discovered 12 previously unknown Chicago police officers who died in the line of duty during our research, one of them even during the American Civil War. And of the 534 Chicago police officers to die, 382 were the victims of gunshots. 21 died in motorcycle accidents. 10 were killed by trains. 8 were the victims of bombs. And more than 50 died in auto crashes. 12 died from injuries sustained in fights, 16 fatal heart attacks. 2 fell to their deaths, and one of them was on fire. 2 fell from their horse, and one of them was thrown under a garbage truck in Lower Wacker Drive. And one, amazingly, died from radiation poisoning after a gun scope he was testing exploded in his face. The most stable period of Chicago life for police deaths was between 1835 and 1875, with only 5 police deaths, even though 2/3 of the male population carried guns at the time. The first Chicago policeman to die in the line of duty was Constable James Quinn, who died in 12/05, 1853. The last to die was Eric Solario on 2/12/2006. The first Chicago police death came 18 years after the department was founded in 1853. The first African-American police officer to die in the line of duty was in 1919, Officer John Simpson, who died during the race riots that year. The first African-American Chicago policeman went on duty just before the fire began. His name was James Shelton. By 1890, there were 30 African-American policemen on the rolls. The first African-American female Chicago police officer, Grace Wilson, was sworn in 1918. The first Hispanic female Chicago police officer to die in the line of duty, Irma Ruiz, September the 22nd, 1988. Los Angeles was the first American city to swear in females, Alice Stebbin Wilson in 1910. New York didn't have a female cop until 1929. Chicago's officers were sworn in 1913. Since the publication of End of Watch, I have been amazed at the number of family members of slain officers who've called us or written us. Sometimes it was just to say thank you. Other times it was to tell us a little-known fact. We even heard from the son of a man convicted of the murder of a Chicago policeman who I suspect, beyond the facts of the case, had some deeper unresolved issues to talk of. At our book launch last month, the 105-year-old mother of a slain Chicago police officer who was killed in the 1940s was present. Her visit was very touching. We would like to thank you for being here today and for supporting our work. And most of all, the chairman and I hope we never have to write a sequel. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Alderman Edward M. Burke is probably the single Chicagoan who needs no introduction. You have to be asleep at the wheel not to know who he is or what he has done in his more than 40 years of public service. When he married Ann McGlone in 1968, he was a Chicago cop when he walked her up the aisle. In that nutshell is the heart and the soul of what brought End of Watch to life. No one has ever been more devoted to, or a devoted champion or a heartfelt friend to the Chicago Police Department than Edward Michael Burke. His refined and erudite taste for history, politics, and Chicago intrigue was the guiding force for this remarkable book. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of Chicago life, the real stories, and he cherishes the city with a relentless pursuit in shaping its laws, its culture, and its financial stability. I believe that End of Watch is really the synthesis of Edward Michael Burke and his lifetime of public service. It touches everything that is important to him. Ladies and gentlemen, my co-author, my boss, and my friend, Edward Michael Burke.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is truthful to observe that in any collaboration there is an uneven distribution of responsibility and effort, and that is certainly the case in this book. The heavy lifting really was accomplished by Tom O'Gorman, and this launch of this book marks Tom's 10th book, and it is a tribute to his great talent and ability. Thank you, Tom, very much for making this come alive. Since 1965, when I graduated in recruit class 65 1A1, I've had the privilege of working under or with a long line of police superintendents, beginning with O.W. Wilson to Superintendent Phil Klein. All of these police professionals left their own particular stamp on their tenure, but none have been greater leaders than Phil Klein, who has announced his retirement. Future generations of police families will gaze on the remarkable police memorial on the lakefront and know that it would not be there but for Phil Klein. Congratulations, Phil, on a job well done, and good luck in all your future endeavors. Superintendent? Shakespeare says, an honest tale speeds best, plainly told. That's what Tom and I have attempted to do in End of Watch. At a variety of levels, we've sought to narrate a fresh take on Chicago history. I hope that it will come alive for readers over the course of 173 years since Chicago's founding. We've also attempted to tell the story of the evolution of a remarkable municipal institution, the Chicago Police Department, from its founding in 1835 to the Great Fire of 1871. This was history largely unrecorded by past writers and believed to have been destroyed by the Great Fire. These important documents were only rediscovered in the late 1980s and provide us with a rich deposit of official city documentation. But most of all, we've sought to put the heroism and the sacrifice of 534 Chicago police officers and their families back where it belongs, in the hearts and on the lips of Chicagoans. Their stories have been painstakingly assembled from a wide variety of sources: newspaper accounts of the day, police superintendents' logs, eyewitness accounts, crime reports, court documents, death certificates, and cemetery records. All of these help to fill out the narratives of these 534 women and men. As you might imagine, sometimes details were sketchy or almost non-existent, while at other times, treasure troves of information were located. All of them assist in helping tell these stories. Out of these details, a wider picture begins to emerge about the city and about the Department of Police, about the sacrifice of uncommon women and men. We hope we've been able to shine some light on the shadows of the past. From Constable James Quinn, an Irish immigrant killed in 1853, to Eric Salerio, killed in 2006, the son of Mexican immigrants. All the great virtues have their expression in the lives of these remarkable Chicago law enforcers. From Chicago's pioneer cowtown past, through the disaster of the Great Fire, through the arrivals of vast numbers of immigrants before the First World War, the Chicago police were here striving to make this great metropolis a place of safety and peace and hope. Amidst the sweeping violence of the Prohibition era and the Depression, Chicago police were the first line of defense against organized crime and hoodlums. They were there as well when ordinary citizens, filled with despair and hunger, turned to crime. In the era of post-World War II recovery, right through the transitions of the 1960s and 70s, as cities changed, as crimes morphed, and a new age of violence came into its own, Chicago police were always there for their fellow citizens. Always serving and protecting were the men and women of the police department who placed their lives on the line for the people of this great city. I hope readers will come to know these remarkable heroes who sacrificed their lives for others. End of Watch is our way of not forgetting the past and our attempt to revive and invigorate our urban memory. These 534 women and men are a powerful part of our shared history. Their stories must be told. The dramas of their sacrifices must be remembered. The details of their deaths are important to know. They are a reminder that heroes still walk among us. Back in June of 1956, Patrolman John J. Blythe, a 42-year-old police veteran, and his partner, Dan Rolowitz, a 22-year-old young officer, heard the sound of gunshots while talking with a fireman at 46th and Wentworth. They raced toward the sounds that came from an alley near 47th and Wells. The shooter fired at the two policemen, hitting John Blythe in the chest. Officer Blythe was transported to Evangelical Hospital at 54th and Morgan Street. He died a short time later. There's a remarkable photo in End of Watch on page 438. It shows Mrs. Blythe at her husband's funeral with her children, standing in the doorway of St. Adrian Church on 71st Street. It's a very moving picture, I think, and in many ways sums up the love, the stoicism, the deep sense of loss that so many families of slain officers suffered. The photo, in a certain sense, is a modern pieta, a powerful icon of human suffering filled with emotion and hurt. I hope that no Chicagoan will ever forget that sorrow and that pain, and it should not be lost to history. On another level, the story of John Blythe is remarkable because it tells us how far modern law enforcement has now come. For almost 100 years, up till 1956, there was very little change in the mechanics of enforcing the law. In 1956, police officers had no radios to carry with them as they do today. Detectives even used their own automobiles when they were on assignment. There was one police car for each district. Did you know that during the 1920s, through a special arrangement with Colonel McCormick, the publisher of the Chicago Tribune, WGN Radio would broadcast police emergency calls right over the regular airways of their standard programming. You might be listening to your favorite show like Barn Dance, and then the broadcast would be interrupted for calling all cars, calling all cars. And of course, the radio installed in those few police cars was only a one-way radio. One other detail of the John Blythe case that is of note. James Dukes, the man who shot Officer Blythe, was tried and convicted of his murder, and he became the last person to be executed in the electric chair at Cook County Jail. Dan Rolowitz, John Blythe's partner, was an official witness at that execution and went on to be the longest-serving detective in the history of the Chicago police. I'm often asked if there was anything startling that we learned in the course of the research for End of Watch. What I found most confounding appears in the graphs at the back of the book. During a conversation last year with noted American historian David McCullough, he stressed how important it was today that such works of urban history be written. He encouraged us to lend a hand to other historians and provide some comparisons in the data we were discovering. So we decided to assemble the statistics for 12 other urban police jurisdictions and compare those figures with Chicago. We looked at Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Detroit, New Orleans, St. Louis, Metro London, Boston, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Miami. Only the city of New York had suffered more police deaths, with 711 officers being killed. Metro London was just less than Chicago, with 518 officers lost in the line of duty. The numbers then dipped dramatically in the other cities. I was taken aback that Chicago's list of those officers killed in the line of duty at 534 was so high. New York's police department is almost 3 times larger than Chicago. So the 534 women and men who were killed in the line of duty is all the more troubling. There is also borne out in another graph in the book, which shows the number of officers killed year by year. And as you will see in the 1920s and 30s, there's a huge spike in the number of officers who are killed. Of course, the 1920s reflect Prohibition police deaths, and the figures for the 1930s identify the terrible despair and hopelessness of the Depression. In the 20s and the 30s, an average of 16 police officers per year were dying in the line of duty. In the years immediately preceding World War II, those numbers dropped dramatically, but then begin to rise gradually in the 50s and spike greatly once again in the 1960s and the 1970s. I hope that the readers will explore their own areas of discovery in End of Watch. The history of the 534 police deaths does hold the wider history of our city in its hands. By some historical standards, 1853 to 2006 is a short span of human events. But there is a unique American tale to be told in this prairie saga. And we believe that it's important to know how these heroes died, where they died, and who perpetrated the terrible deeds. Because from it we learn a great deal about life, about honor, about courage, and about duty. We would like to think that End of Watch is a tribute to these 534 women and men for whom heroism became their last action of life. The landscape of Chicago is enriched by the honor these women and men brought to it. I hope you'll come to know them as we have. And then perhaps we can say with the Irish poet, think where man's glory most begins and ends, and say my glory was I had such friends. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you. As Tom mentioned earlier, we've had so many calls and emails and letters from families of the officers who are included in this book. And I don't know how many relatives of men and women who are portrayed in the book are here today, but I do recognize in the crowd Dorothy Quinnen, whose husband Dan was killed in the line of duty in 1966. And Dorothy's seated right there. And I can tell you from personal experience, there's never been a more loyal or generous supporter of the 100 Club than Dorothy has been, and it's a tribute to the legacy that Dan left to the Department of Police. Also here today is Bill Mooney, whose great-grandfather was murdered when he was a Chicago police detective on January 2nd, 1908. Bill, are you here? Where are you? I was told you were going to be here. Okay. Well, thank you.
If you want to ask the Alderman a question, step up behind Ms. Posner, who always asks the first question.
Hi, Kathy Posner. Besides sitting on the Board of Governors of City Club, I've also been serving on the 18th Police District Advisory Council for the last 15 years, so I, well understand the hard work of the police. I wonder if you could tell us the scariest day that you had when you were a policeman. Every day? Yeah.
I think when I signed my papers to take a leave of absence, I was troubled that I had to leave.
There's no one behind me, but I don't have a follow-up because that was a good answer. Thank you all.
Any other questions? We won't turn your mic off if it's a bad one. Don't worry. Well, listen, Ed and Tom, I want to thank you all.
Here, we have a question
Whoa.
here.
Wait, oh, yes, Mr. Morrow.
You mentioned the similarities between the deaths of the Chicago Police Department and London Metro. They were very similar. How long of a time did that occur during the London Metro? When was that police department?
It's in the book. Tom, what's the year? He wants to know, when you compare police deaths, how long had the London Metro Department been established? Well, it's a little bit older than the Chicago Police, but not all that much. And it's also interesting, is it not, Gus, to think that guns weren't available in London. So there were so many deaths even without firearms. It's striking, but I will leave it to sociologists. Tom and I have talked about this, that there will probably be some candidate for a PhD in sociology that will look at these statistics and try to figure out, why was Chicago so violent? Why were there twice as many deaths in Chicago as there were in Philadelphia? And I don't know the answer to that question.
My name is Mike Radzlowski. I'm a City Club member, an attorney, and my question kind of follows up on like the culture in Chicago, the violence of the interaction. And New York was another city where you had these violent interactions, and I guess it's two parts of that question. What role did that play in the deaths, and how does that compare with other places where I've been, where there seems to be a lot more, I don't know, I guess respect for law and order is a better way of putting it. Like, I've been in situations in Holland, I've been in situations in Italy where I thought things could get very ugly and everybody just respected the police. I mean, there wasn't this level of like, I'm not going to listen to what the police officers say. It was like you had to listen to the police because everyone in that community, it was kind of I don't know if it was forced on people, but it would seem that there was a genuine respect for the right of the police and a genuine belief that they were doing the right thing.
Well, the numbers may be skewed by those series of years in the in the year of the Prohibition and the Depression, when an average of 16 police officers a year were dying in the line of duty. And interestingly enough, only 2 of those police deaths could be really directly linked to the Capone mob. The Capone mobsters, the Nitti mobsters, it would seem were businessmen, and they knew that killing a cop was not good for business. So maybe during those years, because there were so many killed at that period of time, our own numbers are skewed, but that can't be the only answer. So perhaps it is that in those years with hopelessness and joblessness and poverty and despair and unrest, that people were more inclined to take this terrible action against respect for authority. Was it the long history of labor unrest in Chicago that saw police called upon to put down labor strikes and labor unrest that led to a disrespect for authority? I don't know, but the numbers don't lie. And when you see that in Chicago there's 534 and the next closest city, or next closest jurisdiction is less than half, it's a remarkable and a vivid kind of a picture. So what does it mean? I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Alderman, my name is Jatinder Bedi, and I would like you to throw some light on how the nature of crime has evolved from your time of period and what type of crime we find today. What is, if you could draw some comparison, that what was the criminal activities that time and today. And I also have one more question from you, which is very contemporary. As of today, is the state and the government taking care of the families and dependents of the police officers who die on duty? Are they well compensated and taken care of?
The second question, let me address first, and the response is that there's never enough that can be done for the families of police officers who are killed in the line of duty. But government has come a long way in attempting to address the real needs of families who lose their father or mother or their spouse in the line of duty. There is a duty pension for the surviving spouse. The federal government and the state government and the city government to some extent do provide for the financial needs of the families. But I mentioned earlier about the 100 Club, which is a wonderful organization. I hope that if you don't belong now, that you all would think about joining the 100 Club, which supports the families of police officers and firefighters killed in the line of duty. It's a wonderful charity. It's done so much good for the families of police officers and firefighters killed in the line of duty, and not only addresses their immediate needs, but provides the mechanics for providing scholarships to the children of policemen and firemen killed in the line of duty. It's a terrific charity, and I hope if you don't belong that you'll join.
Any other questions? How about a big round of applause for both our officers? Before we go, we have to give Mr. Burke his gift. And despite that they're leaving, these are very important gifts.
Thank you.
I guess you're voting with your feet. We're adjourned.